Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cackle. I'm super excited. So we're going to kill a little time while everyone kind of shuffles in. Okay, one question for you before we actually get started with the official thing.
Okay.
What do you do like on the weekends now that is like fun? That's kind of like
Oh my gosh. What is a weekend? I used to like go to shows and restaurants and all the things that sort of make living in Brooklyn and New York City worthwhile. But these days I go on walks, I do yoga, I do sleep in, honestly. That's like a really important part of my Saturday morning is
oh, that is
getting
nice.
out of bed when I feel like getting out of
I'll
bed.
look forward to when the kids are older and I
Yeah.
can sleep in. So I'm like, how do you do that? Oh, your kids are slightly older than mine.
Yeah. I have a
Right now,
teenager. She wakes up way after I do.
oh, that's so nice. Man, yeah, like right now it's kind of like 6:30 in the morning on Saturday. There'll be like faces like in my face, like, wake up, we want to eat pancakes. And I'm like, okay.
I remember just like pouring cereal and then like putting it on the coffee table and sleeping on the couch when my daughter was little and she would like watch the cartoons and I'd have like one eye open being like, okay, we're alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So hard.
Are you dead? No.
Yeah.
Two boys. And so it's always like if they like leave your sight line and then it's like a little quiet and you're just like, is the house on fire? What are they doing? Something is getting destroyed. Our youngest is really into the toilet paper. Our oldest like never cared about it, and then our youngest is like toilet paper in the
That
toilet.
doesn't end actually. Like I just find toilet paper on the floor and mine are like 10 and 15. So I don't know.
Shamed on the internet.
They're never gonna find this.
Okay, that's so all right. I will officially start. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the Cackle. This is Entry Point's weekly interview series, and we highlight small businesses and startups and people making an impact on the community. So today we're talking about the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I'm super, super pumped. If you have any questions or anything, as usual, you can put them in the comments either on Twitter or Facebook and we'll see them answer. Or if you just have commentary or whatever, feel free to write it down and I try to get to it. And then joining us today, I'm so excited because I'm a very big fan, probably too much so, is Amy Nelson from Venture for America. She's the CEO
Good morning.
of Venture for America. So, okay, before I try to tell all of the things about you, so you're originally from the Midwest.
I am.
You worked in LA for a really long time, which is
That's also true. Yeah.
very fancy. My brother worked in LA for a while. My sister-in-law's from
It
LA.
wasn't that fancy, but there are fancy people there for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
If you're from the Midwest, you're permanently not fancy. And then
Yeah.
you go there and you're like, oh my gosh.
I love when you say you're from the Midwest and people are like, oh, people are so nice there. And that's literally the only thing that they have to say about
Nice
an
there?
entire region of the country. Yes, I've gotten it so many times.
That's so funny because I feel like in LA, I'd rented a car one time when I went to visit my brother, and when the light turns green, the amount of time it takes you to like hit the gas pedal, like I literally couldn't hit it fast enough before the person behind me already beeped at me. I'm like, I literally just saw the light turn green. Like I can't go any faster. I was always like, these people are so serious about their driving. Me out.
That's why I moved to New York, so I didn't have to drive.
True, and the people are meaner about walking. Like, how is it in New York?
Well, I didn't jaywalk before I moved to New York. I thought jaywalking was bad, and then I learned that you actually have to jaywalk in order to survive. But we're fine. We're just taking it one day at a time. I think like everywhere else. The spring was really hard and scary, but it feels like we've gotten some normalcy now.
But overall, I guess outside of the pandemic, you like living in New York and stuff?
I like really love theater and shows and like museums and cultural amenities. So I'm one of those people who actually like takes advantage of that. Otherwise, it makes no sense to live here because it's like incredibly expensive, and everything is hard. So unless you really like New York stuff, I don't know why you would live here.
Yeah, that is true. Like just to get somewhere it just seems like there's so many barriers to entry, like just to go places.
Just to like get your groceries, like everything is harder.
Yeah, I know. How would you like grocery store is just in like
I get mine delivered.
That's some thinking.
I shop on the internet. Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's just easy.
Yeah, that's true. It's 10 times.
I can outsource literally anything. I will.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's like the critical, like running a business and being a parent and doing all of the things. Like I literally just think of like, what things can I outsource? Like, can somebody else fold this laundry? We actually we have a teenager that lives next door that folds our laundry. That is, like,
I mean, I'm sure that teenager loves the extra income. I think it's brilliant.
Yes, it's so amazing. Okay, on to the business purpose. So talk a little bit about what Venture for America is, just so that I know.
Absolutely. We are a fellowship program and community for aspiring young entrepreneurs. So we work with recent college graduates. Very selective program. We'll have probably 3,000 or more applications this year for about 200 fellowships. And then what we do is we train those fellows. They spend a month with us in our training program, which typically takes place in Detroit. It was on the internet this past year. And then we place those fellows with a startup or growth company in one of 14 cities. So we work in Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, Birmingham, cities that have these kind of emerging entrepreneurial ecosystems, but are really hungry to attract more talent. And so our fellows are almost like an apprentice to an existing entrepreneur, helping them build their business. They spend 2 years working for that company or longer. And throughout the 2 years, we have programming and opportunities for them to start to build a side hustle and sort of ultimately their own company. And so we really want to be a pathway into entrepreneurship for young people.
Oh, I like that. And some additional context, we like anytime I'm talking to somebody, like even on like the Cackle or whatever, like some business leader that I'm like, oh, this is the new greatest person. They're always like, oh yeah, and I'm on the board of VFA, and I'll be like, all of the people that I like the most are always like on the board or like help with in some capacity with VFA, and then it's the same with the actual fellows. Like anytime I'm like, man, this person is just so good. Like everything that we're working on with them is like, and there'll be like a lot of different organizations, and I'll just be like, man, this person is just on it, and I'll be like, oh, where are you from? And they'll be like, oh, Washington, D.C. I'm like, oh, why are you in Michigan? And they're like, oh, I'm a VFA fellow. And I'm like, aha! They're like always the world's best, hardest person. Like, I don't know, like the selection process must be so good because like
it's pretty rigorous.
People.
That's very kind of you to say. We try to surround ourselves with really great people who share our values, and I think that comes across. So I'm glad you're having that experience.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm obsessed with all of them, and they're always like the most interesting people too. Like I'm always.
Oh yeah, I mean we like people who are curious and do different things. We're more than our jobs, right?
Yeah. So what was the goal? Like what's the goal for VFA? Like why was it originally started, and like what
yeah, it's a few things. So one, I think there was this notion back in 0809, we were founded in 2011, that our smartest young people, our most talented college graduates, were doing a very narrow set of things. They were working for banks and consulting firms. They're going to law school. Now they're working for big tech as well out in the Bay Area. And, the financial industry had like literally blown up the economy. And we were like, why are we sending these incredibly talented humans to go work in these soul sucking jobs that are actually perhaps bad for us as a society? And why aren't we encouraging young people to start businesses? And I remember like when I graduated from business school, the folks who were like doing entrepreneurship, it was kind of like code for didn't get a job. And that was really the standard of the culture, right? And like what success looked like. And I think that's rapidly changing, and we've been a part of that to some extent. But it was really this notion of how can we redefine success and put people in a position to take risks, build something, and really create value in the world rather than extract value. And what we were also seeing was that, the rate of new business formation and entrepreneurship has been steadily declining for about 40 years in our country. And young people were actually far less likely to own a business than really any other time in recent American history. And we thought that that spelled disaster because as probably and your audience knows, almost all new jobs created in this country come from new businesses. And so if we're not continuously starting new things, we're not creating jobs. And we felt like it was a really big just economic disaster waiting to happen. But at the same time, there was really exciting stuff happening. Like I grew up in St. Louis or in the St. Louis area. And when I graduated from college, there weren't jobs there for people like me. There weren't opportunities. No one was talking about innovation. And now it's totally different. And we saw that happening and we wanted to be a part of it and really help fuel that growth.
Yeah, there is a lot. Like I always am hearing like great things about St. Louis and just like everything that's going on there. And like they're like always seem to have like some new exciting thing happening, like even just in the last like 5 years. So,
they've been really smart. I don't know if you're familiar with the Arch Grants program, but I think some organizations in Michigan have tried to do similar programs, but it's $50,000 of non-dilutive capital for early stage companies to relocate to St. Louis, or companies that are already there, and they've been like extraordinarily successful in getting people to move to St. Louis and stay there in ways that I wouldn't have even predicted. So
yeah,
there's good stuff.
Those companies. I'm like always like I'm like totally like an analyzer of like economic development programs and like what's working and what's not working. And like there's been programs I know in Michigan at least that have done something similar, but then it depends like who they are having as the selection panel. There was something a while back that they did something kind of like that, but it was like they had selected like economic developers to pick the companies, and then like instead of
and not like VCs or startup people. Yeah,
exactly. And then it ended up like a lot of those companies just were like and everyone was like, no, that wasn't our idea. That was somebody else's idea. No one knows whose idea it was. It's just like Selenius. And then I guess like describe the type of new graduate VFA works with and kind of like where they're from, what the demographics are, like what kind of person you guys look for.
Yeah, there's no like one profile. We're an incredibly diverse group. Our most recent class was majority racial and ethnic minorities. It was majority women, but pretty balanced, honestly. Our fellows come from all over. I think almost all of the 50 states are represented at this point in our community. I think we had about 120, maybe 125 schools represented in our most recent class, which was 210 fellows. So, and then their majors are also kind of across the board. About a third are like science, tech, engineering types. About a third are economics and business. And the remaining third is everything else under the sun. But there's no one like thing that you should study or put on your resume to become a VFA fellow. We're really looking for personal attributes. And so, yes, we want people who've substantially contributed in their internships and academic career. But we also want folks who demonstrate resilience, right? Are you the kind of person who, when you hear no, you're going to dust yourself off, get back in the game? Because that's what entrepreneurship is. It's like failing again and again and again and just like being persistent. Are you optimistic? We think that in order to invest in the future and like truly become an entrepreneur, you have to believe that the future can get better. And so we don't have a lot of cynics in our community. I don't think there's space for that.
Yeah, and then true with the people that I've met, they do seem to be like very like, what can the future hold? Like,
yeah. And then something we talk about a lot is this notion of adaptive excellence. Are you someone who can get into an unfamiliar environment, get up a learning curve really quickly and just add value and like find ways to be useful and have this sort of like bias for action in ways that actually contribute and don't hinder progress?
So how do you go about finding out if they have those attributes?
Yeah, so the process is a written application, and we're really screening for those basic qualifications in terms of like skill sets and understanding how they've added value at that point. And then we have a video interview, which is largely designed to identify mission fit, right? Is this someone who wants to build a for-profit enterprise in one of our cities, substantially contribute to that? Because, there are folks who love our social mission and really want to contribute in a more nonprofit context. And most of the time, there's actually probably a better way for them to do that than to do VFA, because we're so focused on entrepreneurship and startups. And not always, but and then at the same time, like if they really want to move to San Francisco and that's like their career goal, why would you join a program that's focused on Detroit and Cleveland? It's not going to be a fit. And do they really kind of like have the right expectations? So that's really about like discovering fit, I would say, with the program itself. And then our final step, and we invite maybe 20% of the applicant pool to our selection day. And that's a group-based interview where they go through a series of exercises together that's really designed to show how they collaborate, how they think through problems, how they behave in that kind of challenging environment. It's like intentionally stressful. And that's where you get at those personal characteristics in a really robust way. And then there's also an individual interview as part of that selection day that's a little bit more in depth. So, and we've had a lot of folks. I don't think you've had the chance to join one of our selection days as a judge, but
yeah, I don't think so. I did.
We'll have you next time.
I'll be like, who is the best?
It's fun. It's fun, especially to be on the sort of like other side of the table where you're evaluating and not the person stressed out in the moment.
Yeah, well,
it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, wait, I'm always the person stressed out in the moment. What's happening right now? Yeah, it's like crazy because I would be interested to see more of like the like selection, like application or whatever, because I totally think you guys are able to find those people and like correctly. Like I think a lot of people are like good interviewers or whatever, but it's like so like luck if you end up getting somebody that you're like, yes, they were what we thought. That's so
yeah,
great.
the process is good. I think it's hard to hide in one of those like challenge-based interviews where you're actually literally seeing how someone works. And I also think a lot of it is self-selection, right? Like we rely a lot on word of mouth, and I think we're pretty transparent in our marketing about who we are. And so generally speaking, the folks who are applying to Venture for America are the right people. We don't get applications out of left field of people who are just like totally unqualified. So we're blessed with a really strong set to begin with, and then we're able to refine based on really that fit for this program. And there are plenty of like, we've said no to people with like 4.0s at Ivy League institutions who just like weren't right for the program. And I think having that kind of discipline is important.
Those people are no fun anyway, though.
I won't speak to that. We've also said yes to those people and had great experiences. It's a different circumstance.
Yeah. I was actually last week, the reason why I'm now harping on this so much is last week we had an angel investor on the Cackle who's invested like 150 million. He's like a super angel, I guess you would call them, that terminology though, but and he's a Midwest investor and was saying that like all he does is looks for CEOs that have like these 3 basic criteria, which now I'm going to forget all of them. But like I was saying to him, like he was like, this is the type of person. He was basically like describing like a venture fellow or like a venture fellow. And I was like, that's so funny because I bet Venture for America has like a lot of these things like baked into their process. And you guys might call them something different, but it was like intelligence and like integrity and one other thing that if anybody watching knows, they should just drop in the comments.
Yeah, I mean, integrity of character is a really important part of our nomenclature and what we talk about. We have a credo. It's a series of 5 statements that every VFA fellow and team member and community member really signs onto. And the last one is, I will act with integrity in all things. And I remember when I was joining the organization, I was like, wow, that's a really high bar. Like, how do we measure that? And it's not imprecise, but I think it's even in like making that commitment, you actually like start to think about it on a day-to-day basis. And unfortunately, like our educational institutions often don't focus on ethics and integrity in the way that they should. And so it's actually quite rare that young people have had, I think they're socially conscious, but they haven't necessarily had exposure to like systems of ethical design. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that is interesting. I like that. Okay. And then what do you find that graduates are looking for in a workplace?
Yeah, it's interesting because our most recent classes are true like Gen Z, and there are some shifts I think from the millennials. And what's important to know about Gen Z is they're just like incredibly socially conscious and incredibly insecure. Um, these are the folks who are marching for our lives and who are climate striking and really in some ways are also substantially contributing to the movement for Black lives. So they want to create a world that is very, very different than the one that they grew up in. But at the same time, they have like massive social media FOMO. And they're literally worried that like the climate is going to be destroyed and they're not going to be able to like have children, or that they're going to be shot in their classrooms. These are like real anxieties that they're carrying with them. And because they were quite young when the last recession happened, and now they're graduating into this current environment, the anxiety and like the risk aversion is extraordinarily high. And those things sit in like real tension with one another. And so I think some of us who have been in the workforce for longer think some of these calls for like mental health and safety and all of that are a little overwrought. But you have to think about the environment in which people have grown up and cut their teeth and the lack of security that they've very consistently felt. And how can you as an employer create that security? And it remains to be seen. Like millennials have been incredibly transient, like moving jobs all the time. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case for this group. I think it remains to be seen. And I think if we can create secure environments that match the values of this generation and allow them to like be creative and do their best work, they may be willing to stick around for longer. I don't know. But.
Man, I've talked to very few people that are like kind of in workforce development, and like so it's interesting, like the theory behind it and stuff is like not a lot of what I usually like encounter when I'm talking to people. So I like that, like just that kind of overall view.
One of the ways I like to put it is like millennials really were just like an echo of their baby boomer parents, right? And they, while they were socially conscious, as were the baby boomers, they were also to an extent like sign me up to conform. Like, what does success look like? What hoops do I jump through? What needs to be on my resume? Like, you tell me and I will do it. Doesn't mean they're not willing to like work incredibly hard and put their nose to the grindstone, but they wanted a path that was defined for them. And I don't think that that's how Gen Z operates. But at the same time, there's like these really fundamental things that make them anxious about their futures.
Yeah, that does thing. And like adding, I guess, security in a place of work and knowing that like you can go there and get like feel comfortable and feel like you're doing what you're contributing and things like that. I think, well, I guess that's important to like every generation, but does seem to be like more relevant these days, especially during like the pandemic. Like it seems like a lot of organizations right now who are always put people first and like really been thoughtful and intentional about building like a culture where you can like bring your whole self to work and things like that. I think that's paying off so much now, where like their workforce is like really dedicated to like, oh, we gotta shift things and juggle things around a little bit because the operations need to change because of the pandemic. Like, great, like I'm here for that. And then like the organizations that I think have been super rigid and very like profit first, organization first, people second, are now like totally being slapped for it.
Yeah, I mean, what are organizations if not like groups of humans?
Like it's almost like it takes a good turn. No, like there's like these and maybe it's like in Michigan, there's a lot of like manufacturing organizations and things like that I feel like have gotten more like rigid. Like like early on in the pandemic, I was hearing a lot of people talk about like, oh yeah, people just want to work from home because they're like scared and then they just want to slack off and things like. And I was
but productivity has gone up.
oh,
Many people are working longer hours. It just doesn't tie to reality, and I think a lot of companies are going to be in at least some sort of remote situation very long term, right? I don't think people are going to be mandating people back in the office,
yeah.
5 days a week in the future. It's going to be rare, and I think people don't want that anymore. Now that they kind of, yes, we miss social interaction, but like I don't miss my commute. Do you miss your commute?
No, and my commute was like 5 minutes. I also like wearing sweatpants every day, but I wear sweater.
That's I hear you. I hear
you. Work form. Okay, what trends, I guess, have you been seeing over the years, and particularly this year, with regards to startups hiring new talent?
We were concerned that this year was going to look really, really different, right? Early on in COVID, Glassdoor put out numbers that said entry-level hiring in tech was down 66%. We were talking to companies in March, April, which is typically when our interview process starts with companies and fellows. And they were like, we have no idea if we're going to be able to hire, and like, call me in 6 weeks kind of thing. And it turns out that the companies that we've hired from in the past, both like the actual companies and the profiles of companies have remained the same. There's still a tremendous amount of dry powder out there in the venture world. Deals aren't really slowing down, although maybe we're seeing more later stage deals than early stage deals. And so companies still need to hire and sort of build their businesses, because our fellows have a range of skills. They're not all coders, and that's one sort of misconception, is that like VFA is for tech talent. Actually, the vast majority of our fellows are in more like marketing, business, operations type roles, customer success. They may be doing product management. And of course, there are some that are in technical roles. And so we see things kind of like across the board. If there's one thing that's been consistent that we're hearing from companies in the last year or 2 or 3 that wasn't part of the conversation before, it's been the call for diversity, and seeing Venture for America as a source of diverse talent as leaders really prioritize transforming their teams.
And then you guys do have like a pretty diverse, like the talent pool that you guys work with.
Our cohort is pretty diverse. This past year was the first year that we were more than 50% racial and ethnic minorities. It was the second year we were more than 50% women in terms of the class. So we really are aiming to produce a pool that's representative of America. And maybe pushing even more in the direction of the cities that we work in that tend to be, majority minority, for lack of a better term.
That's a great segue to our next question. I was like, oh, you set that up perfectly. So we do a lot of research on like the tech community, and only 13% of Michigan's venture-backed startups are led by racial minorities, and 16% of venture capital professionals are a racial minority. Across Michigan, the startup and venture capital communities are comprised of approximately 70% white men, both specifically. So this is, and I feel like just in the data, this is kind of shown over and over again, is that, if you look at Detroit, I think that those stats are felt a little bit more acutely, and Detroit's a VFA city. So the Black population in Detroit makes up 79% of the total population in Detroit. And so how does VFA help to create a more diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem in cities where Detroit, where the tech community doesn't necessarily reflect the actual community?
Yeah, we're certainly part of the solution. And I think that we have prioritized working with leaders of color whenever possible. And we're going to be putting an increasing emphasis on that as we move forward. I think that Venture for America is not a substitute for identifying and cultivating extraordinary local talent. I think there are a lot of Detroit high schools that are, doing great work and feeding into, institutions of higher education and other sorts of programs that are preparing a tech workforce. And, for us, we just want to be part of the solution. And I think for our fellows, entering an environment that is inclusive is kind of table stakes at this point. So I'm not going to claim that we're like radically transforming, but we want to be on the right side of these issues, and we want to be able to push our partners to live into the standards that we uphold.
And I do think that Venture for America does seem to like prove out I feel like maybe 5 years ago, I was hearing a lot from startup companies and venture capitalists where they were saying, well, it's like, this is a pipeline problem. Like, we've tried to find diverse talent. We try to find, women, racial minorities, people within the LGBTQ plus community. And, they're just not out there. And like, so then we just end up with white guys, like only white guys apply. So like, that's what we end up with. And I feel like that's like, after a while, I started being like, actually, I think that might be a little bit of bullshit.
It's a total excuse and it's total garbage. And like, there is, the K4 Center put out this leaky tech pipeline report a year or two ago that was very clear that like, particularly Black and Brown employees, but also women, leave tech companies at extraordinarily high rates because they feel excluded because of hostile culture and bias. And so if you're not finding the right people, it's probably because your organization has a reputation for being exclusionary.
Yeah.
But that talent exists.
Like, you guys are a perfect example of like, you have the best of the best talent that is doing like amazing, like at all of these different organizations. That's like, they're always the best people, and it's a very diverse group of people. And so like, you're like, well, we're able to do it. So like, what's your problem?
Yeah, I just don't buy it when I hear that from people, because it doesn't tie to my experience.
Yeah. And then what do you think that was one thing that employers could be doing to attract and retain more diverse talent?
Yeah, I don't think there's one thing, honestly.
It's not saying, tell me all the things.
I mean, honestly, it can't just be, I woke up today and I recognize that my team is not diverse enough and I want to change it. Therefore, I'm going to like start doing some activities. Yeah. It's really about a holistic process as like a leader of like confronting, like, why does my team look this way? What am I doing to frankly like uphold white supremacy in the institutions that I touch? And like, why has this come to manifest? And how can I educate myself on these systems? And if you don't do that foundational work, and then ask the hard questions and like have real conversations with your team, if you just hire a person of color and you have done nothing to change, that person is almost certainly going to have an extraordinarily bad experience and be worse off than when you started. And so, we shouldn't be doing things to make ourselves feel better as leaders that our team is diverse if those activities are actually putting candidates of color in harm's way. And so we have to center the experience and the perspective of people from oppressed and marginalized groups if we want to get serious about this at all. And so there aren't quick fixes. And it needs to be also a recognition that like the work never ends. It's not like, okay, we like hired this consultant and we diversified our team and we have affinity groups and we're done now. Yeah. That's not real. It's a constant willingness to wrestle with deeply uncomfortable issues and hold a mirror up to yourself. And if you as a leader, frankly, aren't willing to do that work, then you have no business even engaging in this, because you might actually cause more harm than good.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I like that. And then I'm like, well, I'll ask you one more question and then and then nothing else. Just shut the computer. What do you think, where do you think that WFA is headed as an organization over the next 5-ish years?
Yeah, we are having some pretty exciting conversations with new cities and geographies about expanding our program there. And so I think that's something that folks can look forward to in the near future. If you are interested in bringing your Venture for America to your city, please reach out to me. We're raising a second investment fund to be able to support our alumni who are starting businesses.
Oh, cool.
And there may be sort of offshoots from that we explore. We're finishing up our current strategic plan, and then we'll have a period of like reflection and making sure that we lived into that in the way that we wanted before putting out a new one probably in like early 2022. So it's a period of looking back. Next year's our 10-year anniversary actually, and we're doing a big study of our impact that will come out at some point next year. So stay tuned.
I feel
yeah,
like
it's right up your alley, honestly.
Yeah, I was like, who's doing that for you? But who is doing it?
We're actually working with 4 different teams of researchers at different universities. So there's a team at Brown University, a team at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, a team at UC Irvine, and another team at UNC Charlotte. So some great professors of entrepreneurship who study these issues and are kind of looking at different pieces. And yeah, we're excited to see where it heads. We've got some preliminary results now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I will definitely. The data geek in me is like very interested to see that, because I'm a fan of your guys's and then your guys's. It's not correct.
It works.
I'm a fan of VFA and I'm a fan of data, so I feel like if I could see both those things, I'll be like, see, I knew they were great.
I mean, it's not all going to be perfect. I think we also want to understand how we can be better.
Yeah, I think that's like really important too, just whenever we do reports too. It's not to just show the good things, it's to show the things that are like, oh yeah, this is a serious pain point that you can then address. And so I like that. But cool. I am still so obsessed with you guys. I love VFA. Love the work that you guys are doing. And thank you so much.
This was delightful.
Yay. And then I will hopefully talk to you more soon. And I love Sarah Kraft. She's probably watching.
I mean, she's the best.
She is. Yeah, like I'm always like, oh,
she's so good.
So perfect. I love it. So great. Well, thank you so much. And I will talk to you more soon.
Thanks, Emily.
Bye.